waste my life. I don't wanna waste my life. I don't wanna waste my life. Living in this world. It's just some things, there's no going back. You know what I'm saying?
jwoodbeats.com.
Yeah, I'm not the one with the issues. I hear you, now here is your tissue. If I'm moving too fast, I might have to dismiss you. And it's really too bad, cause I really will miss you. But I'm not the one with the issues. I left him at church when I made it official. I murdered the curse with my own benediction. Left God in the dirt, call it death of the fiction. Superstition will be served in eviction. Competition will be left in the ditch. Oh my God, it's too damn hot in this kitchen. The fishes of men are now swimming with fishes. Oops, my bad, I guess I'm moving too vicious. Verses sold, I gotta put them on your wish list. Bless my soul, cause I'm dodging your little hit list. I guess you know, you just lost another witness.
Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go right now. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, I'm out of here. I can do anything, fuck your opinions and energy. I finally got the epitome. My biggest hindrance was God can't do nothing but fail. Greater is me. I never needed your deity. All of this human capacity. When it gets rough, I can pick myself up and prevail. Cause I don't need anything other than people who fuck with me. Good business, it starts with good company. That's why your boy is obsessed with community. Cause greater is we. We can create opportunity, doing what God never did, cause a God never could, but a people is all we need. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, yeah. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go right now. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, yeah. Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go, I'm out of here. Let me go, I'm out of here. Let me go, I'm out of here. Let me go, I'm out of here.
What's up, family? Happy Sunday, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you are having a wonderful day. It is another happy secular Sunday, and I think we have a wonderful session planned today. So glad to see so many of you already in the chat. I see.
Hello, Sharon.
Yes, hello, Sharon. Please, Sharon, don't forget to email us your address because the books are coming in this week. Amazon is being slow, as they sometimes do. We see PC in the chat. Dale is out there holding it down as always. Alyssa, love y'all so much, man. Are y'all as excited about today as we are? You know,
Absolutely.
because this is just going to be exciting. Let me see here. Let me get over here to my notes. First, of course, we want to welcome you in and thank you for joining our Sunday sessions. We've been at this for a while now. We've gone through so many series of conversations so far, and they've all just been incredible. Of course, we started with the thesis of secular community, moved over to how to human, which is that one was so impactful for me that like it's having me to update some notes in one of my books that I'm working on. And then we did this Please Don't Stop the Music, which was just fun. We did a lot of clickbaiting with the titles of that one. Yes.
And the images table dance.
The table dancing. Yeah, that was my favorite one. And then also, of course, we just got out of Change My Mind, which I think out of all the ones we've done so far, that has to be just one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah.
The conversations that we had around neurodiversity, neuroplasticity, and just how mind change works on the safety of spectrum, on the spectrum of safety, I thought was absolutely beautiful. Of course, if you've not already, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that alert notification bell. Also consider joining our community either on Patreon, through Discord, and the YouTube membership program. And of course, you can always volunteer, which we're doing our best to make easier and easier. And we have merch, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of that merch today in just a few.
And we'll drop the link.
And we'll drop the links. That's right. All right. So we do have a few acknowledgments before we jump into our announcements for today. And that is, of course, if you missed this week's Ex-Pastor call-in show, come on, man. You've got to get in there and check it out. It was an incredible. This third episode was just awesome. It was fresh. It was raw. It was relevant. Like go back and look at it for yourself. I think right now it has the most comments under it, and they're still building out of all of the Ex-Pastor call-in shows. So it looked like it really touched something for people. Also, we did the hang up with Matt Dillahunty this week. Please go check that out. That was an interesting time. You can keep it up a little longer than that. It's like snapshots. That was an interesting time. I mean, number one, of course, I enjoyed myself.
Yes, great show.
Great show. The questions were interesting. Ended up inspiring another video. All right, so also Discord groups. For those of you that are in the Discord community, I did drop two new resources in the group this week. It was fun, Dale. It was. Dropped 2 new resources in the Discord this week. For those of you who are interested in starting groups, because as we talked about in the thesis of secular community, still don't know why. I get it, Kai. I'm so glad I know your name now. Kenny is in the building. But yeah, because there has been interest with expanding and starting other groups. And when we talked about when we did thesis of secular community, we definitely talked about how groups are a major part of the framework of Bridge City and the Bridge. And so Discord is a great place to expand that. So for those of you who are interested in starting groups and helping facilitate those groups, please check out that video in Discord and check out the resource, which will just kind of give you some safety parameters. All right. So, yeah, because I'm actually looking at starting a new group in there as well. As many of you know, I am a fiction writer. Which way do I go? It's this way. Yeah, that's my novel right there. And I'm working on part 2 right now, along with some other novels. And so I realized that we also have some other people in the community who are also fiction writers, novel writers who like stuff like that. So that will be an idea of a good group to start. All right, so I got to hit this too. I have not shared my screen yet. Let me do this so we can roll through these, because I know y'all are as excited as I am to hear from our special guest today. Did I click the right button? I did. It's just going slow. All right, so I got some things that I want to share. Community growth, man. Our little community is growing, and I'll just put that up there. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But our little community is growing. Everywhere you see a little blue dot on that map, there are places where people have expressed interest in working with us and in building secular community beyond superstition. And so this map is growing every day, and it's exciting. So we're tracking it. And one of the biggest reasons we're tracking that is so that as we get, as more people express interest in things of those natures in their specific localities, we can start connecting those people so that they can start building real community where they are. Absolutely. Kenny, I knew you'd be excited about it. That's why I love y'all. That's why I love y'all. Also, let me see here. Now I got to switch back over to my notes. Volunteer growth. Yes. Like I think I talked about this last week, but I'm super excited, man. We have people on the administrative team, on the media team, on the chat team. It's exciting on the community engagement team. So this is, I'm going to be like geeking out a lot over the next few weeks, because like I didn't expect things to start flowing like this, but just a major shout out to all of you. Because at the end of the day, it's not about taking stuff off of our plate. It's about seeing this community come to life with activity. And so that's beautiful. All right, babe, you want to hit the announcement since I have been monopolizing the time talking?
Yes. So this week's Ex-Pastor, Ex-Pastor. This week's Bible study with Ex-Pastor will be at its regular time at 5 Central. If you haven't caught last week's, it was great. It started 30 minutes early, but y'all were able to roll on right through it. So
I thought you said Yahweh for a minute. I was about to say he wasn't there.
Yeah. No, but it was great. So if you haven't checked that out, check that out and catch up for this week, because you did ask them a question or to look up something and bring that back. So hopefully,
I'm glad you remember. Because, wow, now I got to go back and watch the episode because I'm giving out homework and forgetting. Yikes.
Yeah, so have your homework ready. So, all right, if you haven't already, go ahead and get the new book, Christ Held Up. We've been getting some great reviews. Thank you to those who have already bought the book and left a review. It's so refreshing to see your thoughts and perspectives of what you got from what you read. All right. And so we appreciate you as always. FAQ Sunday. I know Darante was talking about this for a while. We're so excited. Friends and questions. Fifth Sunday. Okay. We're going to have games, a few questions. We may even have a giveaway or two. So make sure you pop in and stay tuned for that. And that may be the weekend where we kick off or introduce some new Discord groups. So stay tuned for that.
Yes.
Also, if you want to volunteer, if you haven't already, for our live shows, I'm going to drop the link for where our calendar. And this calendar shows you on Sundays and Wednesdays the times that we go live or Darante goes live, and you can help out there. Just make sure you go to the right dates, okay? Don't put your name on the date. You ain't gonna show up.
And I did put it on the screen just so y'all to see how it works. I'm familiar with Google Calendar, and this is a workaround as of now. I am working to shift this to actual where all of this will just be based on our website instead. So that way we can just kind of automate things. And as of now, Google Calendar only allows me to add one person at a time. So it's just like we can only have one volunteer for each team on the calendar. And that's not very sustainable or scalable. No. But this is how it would work. You would click on the one you're interested in. So you got Sunday session, StreamYard team, the Bible study. Why is there just a StreamYard team for Sunday sessions? Oh, okay, it's mixed up. Sunday session, StreamYard team, and then you got the Sunday sessions chat team. Same thing for the Bible study, chat team, or StreamYard team. And then Ex-Pastor call-in show. We also use Discord for our screening room. So that's an additional team. So whichever one of those you're interested in, you would click it, and then you see the dates of availability of what time you're supposed to go. And then, of course, obviously, these shows are weekly for the most part, except for the Ex-Pastor call-in show. So you would go for each week, and you just click your day, man. And then you put your information in there, and I'm going to get an alert. And it's really that easy. Once you've signed up, you're good. All right. So I interrupted there.
No, and thank you, Cal. We saw you pop in on the calendar, so we appreciate you for signing up.
Yes, for next Sunday. That's right.
Yes. Thank you for that.
And we're going to, well, that brings us to the next one. So I'll let you go.
Merch. Yeah, we have new merch rolling out. We've been letting you guys know that we're going to work on a Poor Fella shirt or design, and we have a Poor Fella hoodie. And when you go to it, it'll say "jumped in, found out." Poor fella, you know.
It is.
So there it is. It's $39.95, but you can get 20% off with the discount, which I'm gonna pop in the discount code.
I forgot about the discount. Yes.
FAQ Sunday, you'll get 20%. Now on you, just be mindful. Sometimes YouTube, if you're looking on YouTube, the merch, it shows the wrong pricing, but when you click on the actual store, you'll see the correct pricing. Okay, so if you see 51 for the hoodie, it's not $51, not that much. All right,
this one is a little creepy looking, but it's my favorite. I designed it myself. We call this Jack Out the Box. This is Jack Out the Box. It's a fun design, and the EWS stands for Empower with Style.
Yes.
Okay, so is that the last thing that I got to show on the screen? I don't have anything else I need to show on the screen, right?
No, nothing else. But if you want to hang out, and we do have a post-session hangout in Discord, I'm going to drop that link as well. You can come chat with some of your other people that pop up on the screen here that show up in the chat.
And actually, on that note, there actually is going to be a special meetup today after today's session. And I know I can't remember if it was Alyssa or Kyle that was organizing it. So whoever I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, just let me know. Well, I didn't make it a definitive statement, so I'm not wrong. I'm just just confused. So, but it's being organized, and so I'm actually going to do my absolute best to be there today, because I had a meeting yesterday where I couldn't make it. So, yeah, that's it. And of course, our community members are absolutely awesome in Discord.
Yes.
I appreciate y'all so much
So
for the work
active.
that you're
Thank
doing
you.
and just keeping people involved. I love these conversations, and I think jumping into that aspect of groups is going to be another major push. And for our volunteers, and we had this idea yesterday for our volunteers, we're definitely going to start making sure that, number one, you get steep discounts on all stuff. But then also we're going to just start randomly doing giveaways for volunteers, whether it's books or merch, and we'll kind of let you select it.
Listen, said organized is a strong word.
I love it. I love it. All right. So are y'all ready for our special guest? We've taken up 15 minutes of your time for this long ass intro. And so, but we got to get all this info out. But I am super excited about this. Ever since I had the opportunity to be on Skeptic Haven episode with Mark, I've been incredibly interested in the work that they do over on Apostate of Mind. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage, or the screen rather, to the screen, Mark and Ann Peralta. So glad to have y'all here with us.
Hey. We're excited to be here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Oh man. I think this is going to be a fun conversation. So before we jump into it, y'all tell us a little bit about yourselves. And of course, we'll do this again at the end, but tell us where people can find you, because they're going to be excited through this conversation and they're going to be asking. So I already know. Let's go ahead and head them off.
I think you're better at that, Mark.
Sure. Well, you can find us on YouTube, Apostate of Mind. We're also on Facebook. Mark Peralta is my name, and Apostate Ann. And so, yeah.
And I also want to say, Mark does a lot of advocacy in the Spanish world. So tell them a little bit about your Spanish-speaking channels.
Sure. So we first got started on Nuestra Experiencia Atea, which just means our atheist experience.
Yes.
Which is kind of a spin-off of the atheist experience from the ACA, but in Spanish, and it's a global community. And so there are awesome people there. And so we do Bible studies. We host live debates. We have several very, very unique minds. There's one guy that's he's an engineer. We've got a physics guy. We've got a couple of historians. So we do a lot in that channel for the Hispanic community in terms of addressing misinformation, but most importantly, talking about the dangers of religion.
Absolutely.
So we have lots of people that go out and they share testimonial. We have segments where it's just women talking about, how this affects them. And so we try to keep we have a diverse audience. And so we do lots of different things.
That is awesome. Now, that part I did not know about at all. And so okay, so now my gears are running because I want to know more about that. And so I'm going to be checking that out. Yes. That is awesome, because kind of like African Americans, Hispanics is another community that religious, that and that everybody you meet is going to be religious. So that is super duper awesome that you're working to create space and platform those conversations. Man.
You're exactly right. It's such a deep part of the culture that it's even beyond religion. It's just part of who you are as a community. It really is deep.
Yes, indeed. I know we run into that all the time. I'm currently doing a video on our currently in a series called Black Non-Believers Next Door on our channel, where that's one of the things we're walking through based off of the U.S. Secular Survey report, and taking some of those very real, for lack of better words, testimonials from African Americans and what it feels like once you kind of depart the faith. And it's not just, like you said, it's not just leaving your religion. It feels like you're abandoning your culture, and that's definitely how it gets treated by a lot of people. I've been flat out told, hey, being atheist isn't a black thing. You're not black if you're an atheist. I've actually, it's been more specifically told atheism is Eurocentric. That's white folk stuff, and it's just it's mind blowing how
Wow.
deeply something can be ingrained in a culture. And it's but it's an interesting phenomenon to watch. And I did know that it was a big part of Hispanic culture, but I never had the sense of mind to even imagine that it could be as deeply ingrained on that side, if not more. Especially even considering the role of Catholicism, and that should have been an easy one, but my mind didn't go there.
And
Yeah.
and just kind of a side note, I think it's interesting too, since you're saying that Mark has a brother who's Muslim. And so then just mixing that culture, like for example, like then he couldn't kiss me. And the Latino culture, we're all about kissing and touching and hugging, and just seeing how those cultures that are religiously based, how that impacts everything. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting how many rules we learn just from being in a religious household.
Yeah.
And it's so restrictive. It doesn't let you really get out of the box until you start asking more questions and learning more for yourself. So.
That actually is a good question. I'm curious to know what is it like growing up in a religious community from a Hispanic perspective. My upbringing, I always kind of described as culturally religious, where my family weren't necessarily devout. But they did attach themselves to the label. They did go to church every now and then. And there were certain expectations about how you lived, what you said. And it bled over into other things that weren't necessarily scriptural based, but it was, we did these things because we're good Christians. I'm curious, what were those dynamics like for you two?
So for me, growing up Catholic in South America was very unique because, well, at least in Colombia, the country was, until 1991, the country's official religion was Catholicism. So it was pretty much part of my identity growing up. Like my certificate of baptism was right next to my birth certificate, because that's part of was part of the culture. And but I think later in life, it became easier as an adult to kind of choose, and I ended up at the evangelical church as an adult. But yeah, I mean, it's just everyone around me was Catholic. Public schools were not all that in South America, so you went to Catholic private school, so you're in mass at least once a week. At the school, there was a chapel that you had to attend weekly mass. So yeah, it's all part of everything. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm more Americanized because I was born here. And so my dad wasn't that religious. He was more new age. So that's kind of how I grew up. And I went to the church later on as a teen, just being in the South and everybody else being around me, inviting me to church and church functions and all that. And that's kind of how I got sucked in. And I had a musical singing background too. So they had me be part of the worship team. So I was like straight to, leading when I didn't even know the songs. I didn't grow up with the songs. I was learning the songs as I'm, performing them on stage. But how I did was influenced by religion is I did have pastor aunt and uncle, and they were very charismatic. So like when I'm visiting my cousins and I had my hoop earrings, it was like, oh, she's a gypsy. And if I had nail polish on, like that's very prostitute-y.
Yep.
And don't have Cabbage Patch Kid dolls, that's demonic. And I would hear all those things and I was like, okay, like my parents let me, all right. Like it was just kind of
sounds like the
weird.
church I got saved in.
Uh-huh.
That was the type of holiness Pentecostals where the basic line was, if it makes you sin, if it makes you grin, it must be sin.
So much like red lipstick.
Yes.
People wear.
I remember when I was still a teenager in ministry, I had to preach at a Kojic church, which is church No, it was Church of God by Faith. That's a different denomination.
Yeah.
But had to preach there, and one of the girls that came with us was wearing like a shirt that showed her underarms. And so one of the ladies came and pulled her to the side and said, "You're going to have to put something over that because we don't allow you to expose your underarms in here because it looks like female genitalia." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah, and
What?
that was
What?
even in the Pentecostal Baptist church, because I was a dancer, right? And so I did a lot of liturgical dance as well on the side. And some churches will be upset even if you wore short sleeves with your unitards with the skirts, and then some people are upset if you wear white, and some people are like
it was very interesting.
Yeah.
You guys just reminded me about a time, I think it was Easter service, and I had this really cute Easter dress, but it wasn't short, but when you're on stage, you know, you're elevated.
Right.
And so then I ended up wearing tights with the dress, and then it was like sleeveless and kind of cold. So then I had a sweater, and I just looked ridiculous, you know, and it was just like, you gotta like have all the layers on. But at the same time, I also feel like at least the churches we were going to, there was a big emphasis on the women to be very stylish.
Yes.
And a lot of pressure.
Those are the churches we're from.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting how much thought has to go into what you're wearing, has to cover everything, has to be of the top style, you know, all the things.
And you know what I also found interesting was each generation had their own style, because the older ladies who they considered elders or the mothers, they loved the hats. I grew up in and sometimes the gloves and the whole suit. And then the younger ladies, they had the hair done with, you know, everything laid and slayed, and they may have wore tighter outfits, and so everybody's talking about each other, and it was interesting there. I'm like, this is supposed to be a place of love, and then the pastor comes up, the doors are open for everyone, and then you realize the doors are only open for people they like.
You're like, come as yourself in your fanciest, most expensive, prettiest clothes.
That's right. That's right. I think the way we started saying it in urban churches was, "Come as you are, but you won't stay as you are." And I remember thinking about that one day. Then we really don't want them to come as they are. The whole point is come here so we can change you. You know?
Exactly.
Oh, man.
They're cracking up in the chat.
The underarms got me going. That's hilarious. And
I didn't know you were going there with that.
I thought I was pretty holy, and so like, and you know, I was kind of strict at that time, and that was new for me. Like that was mind blowing.
How about the pervert who's seeing an armpit and thinking about
that? Like, oh man, I can't wait.
That's
You're
not
having
you.
an American Pie moment with armpits. It's
but even if you have the thought, like, it's not like you're gonna go and act upon that thought on stage because you see that in the moment. It's so silly.
It really did get ridiculous. Oh my goodness.
Now I know the last church Darante and I were at was fully Baptist, and it was like an older congregation. Only a few people showed up, but when we got there, we got the younger people showing up. But the older ushers were so bent on closing the doors and not letting people in. If you're praying or if anything going on, they would be so mean. And I'm like, how are you?
Well, that's a staple for Baptist, for National Baptist churches. One of the dynamics that people like, those National Baptist churches don't exist to evangelize and outreach. They exist to preserve tradition. And so if you're coming to this church, you're coming to this church to honor this tradition. And so, because my parents were national, or not my parents, but my mother's side of the family were National Baptist. And my granny, who was actually my great aunt, that was one of her roles, to hold the door. Hey, if they're praying, nobody's supposed to be moving while the Lord is moving. That was their ideology. And they would literally, so if you came to church and they were praying and you were trying to open a door, they're holding it tight from you. Like it was crazy. And I guess baby girl had never seen anything like that. I grew up with it, so I was used to it. We pulled the door, they pulled back. So we gotta wait. I guess they praying now, you know. And it wasn't even a good prayer. It was one of those boring prayers where they're just, I don't know if y'all have ever been to a Black National Baptist church. They're not fun. They're not the hip ones. They're not the. It's the ones where they still sing Negro spirituals, and so you're gonna feel uncomfortable. But much part of the service, you're gonna be like, I don't know if it's safe to still sing this song. I don't know how I feel about this.
There's some traditions we shouldn't preserve.
Right.
Exactly.
Growing up Catholic, we didn't have that issue at the door because in the Catholic Church, as long as you made the Roman sign with the holy water on your way in, you're okay. You can come in.
I love that. No, were there any consequences if you didn't do the sign with the
It would have seemed highly suspicious. Like, why isn't he doing that? In fact, the tradition was that even if you just drove past the church, you still got to do the Roman sign.
Oh my God.
And then every time you got in the car, you got to do this. Exit the house, you do this. So everywhere you went, it was just like you got to make that Roman sign.
It's like putting on your armor.
Putting on
your imaginary armor.
That's it. The imaginary armor. That's it.
That's like how we do with the oil. Like
the Pentecostal churches.
Carry
we
the
got
oil.
To put the oil on you. And we do the Roman sign, but we just do it on your forehead right before we do this. So it's just typically in the deep Pentecostal churches, you're going to get this, and then you're going to get this. And then if you struggle a little bit, we're just going to take the oil and just start pouring the whole thing on you. It gets really creepy in the smaller Pentecostal churches. It's
oh wow.
And like I think that's the actual reason why I left the smaller churches, because I walked to church in those days. And I remember them like greasing my head with oil one day and having to walk home in the Alabama sun after that. It's just not a great feeling.
And it damaged your clothes.
Oh yeah, it did damage clothes. How rude.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Now the Catholics, the more devout ones, would make actually 4 crosses. So you go here once, over your mouth, over your head, and then like the full thing.
Oh, that's like gang signs at that moment. Like
you see like the real devout ones are like,
oh shoot. Like I'd get that mixed up so quick. My hand-eye coordination isn't good enough for that. I'm gonna be making X's instead of crosses, and somebody's gonna swear I'm the devil. It's gonna get messed up.
You're gonna switch. Now, how was communion like for you all?
That is a big difference for sure.
Yeah, for us. So I had to go through some classes, and then there was a whole ceremony, and then they throw a party for you. They cut the cake. It's kind of like
you have to go through classes to take communion.
Yeah. Classes, and then that's not enough. Later, you do what's called confirmation, where you sort of like you have to recite the creed and profess your faith. But yeah, I didn't stay in the church long enough to actually do confirmation. So
wow.
Yeah.
I actually respect that they have communion class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learn a little more about it.
Because in the Black church, it's just depending on the type of church. If it's holiness church, you can't have communion until you're 12 because they use real alcohol. In the Baptist church, you can have as much communion as you want because it's grape juice and wafers.
Yeah.
It's like ramen noodles.
And it's funny because you never really, at least from my experience back home, we never really taught what and why. It's just kind of, you may have a sermon topic center around it, and then you're just told, drink this,
do this in remembrance of him.
Yeah, remembrance of you, and you save your life. And most of the people on the rows, when I was in church, they were hungry, so they were like, "Oh, I'm hungry," and so they would take like 5 communion
we were killing.
Yeah,
I know as a kid, I let me get as many of them crackers as I can, because how you gonna tease my appetite like this? No, I need some more, please. I can remember getting in trouble, but holiness church, they didn't play that game. This is serious. This is the Lord heals people here, and or the Lord kills people here if you take it unworthily. That was a really big thing in Church of Our Lord Jesus Christ. If you take communion unworthily, the Lord will strike you dead. But that was a big thing for them as part of their whole theology. Yeah. If you were a woman in the pulpit, the Lord would strike you dead. If you were a child running across the pulpit, the Lord would strike you dead. If you were leading praise and worship with sin in your heart, the Lord would strike you dead. So they were the strike you dead type of folks.
Praise be to him.
Praise be to him, right?
Some still believe like men wearing earrings. They wouldn't let the young guys in the church because they had pierced ears.
Oh yeah, I got kicked out for having braids. That was I wouldn't cut my
Whoa.
braids, and so they were like, "You can't come here. The devil is on you."
Yeah, that's so crazy. So with concepts like that, and this for you and Darante and Ann, from your experience, did moments that you seen like that on how other people behave, did that start to affect you as you got older? Like, oh, I don't want to treat people this way, or I think I want to do this a little differently.
That's a good question.
Well, to clarify, that's how Mark grew up in Colombia, but here we were very evangelical or even fundamental at some point, but not so much in. I feel like we're of the generation where we grew up here and we were more embracing to other people.
Yeah.
But for me, I remember, since I didn't grow up in the church, I remember when I was in a church service and I heard the pastor like speaking against gay people. And I remember being so shocked.
Yes.
Like, are you guys hearing what he's saying? And nobody else was looking, like batting an eye. And I remember getting up and leaving the church. And I think I went there
Good
by
for you.
myself as a teen.
Yes.
And I just walked out. And I thought, okay, maybe that's just that church. And I didn't know it was like a Christian thing across the board.
Yep.
So I was trying other churches in the process. But they're so good at not talking about those things, right? And just talking about the pretty things and like connecting people. And so, Mark, you can answer, but I wanted to share too that I think that was also early signs that Mark and I had, is that the church wasn't really interested in learning what the Bible had to say. And Mark was really into like Bible study. Let's teach what the Bible says, spread the gospel. And everyone's like, no, you don't really need all that. Like, you just need somebody that can connect people, who's charismatic. And, that's what they were looking for.
Yep, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I had some shockers along the way, transitioning from a Catholic upbringing to an evangelical and adult. One of those was the people raising their hands during worship. I thought,
so bizarre. That was my favorite part. I love to raise my hands
because Catholics are so devout and austere, and they kneel.
Yes.
But this whole raising hands thing, it's so foreign, and it felt awkward at first, but you sort of start just kind of doing what everybody else around you is doing because you want to fit in. And so, we all conform to that. Something else was the speaking of in tongues. That was very bizarre. Just all the it just seemed like so put on, like it was just a fake, something that was not really happening, but is being fabricated, or I don't know.
For sure.
Yeah. So,
I know for me, that was one of the reasons I transitioned from the more traditional churches to the urban churches. That's also why I still say that DMV churches were behind. Because by far and large, the majority of urban churches, like Ann just said, moved away from issues like that. You came to, these were you remember when we went to the Rock. Nobody talked about anybody for wearing earrings, tattoos, tights, anything. Like the praise and worship leader got tights on and stuff like that. Because by far and large, the urban church, and this is something that I try to share with the secular community a lot, is that a lot of these urban churches are so far removed from actual Christianity. And it's because of and the traditional churches saw this coming. It was the seeker-friendly movement, where churches decided to be more seeker-friendly. So they started taking the crosses out of the building, start taking the flowers off of the stage, started trying to modernize the experience. And then what you end up getting almost unintendedly is more people-centric sermons. And so then the whole experience is now about how do we make people feel better? How do we help people live their best life? How do we help people financially? And this is so foreign to what we kind of traditionally knew as Christianity. But at the same time, it is making it easier for people to leave the faith. because it's just like, oh, I can actually do all of these things without believing in any of this shit. So I think I'm gonna be
Good.
I think I'm not gonna be back next Sunday, you know. But that's what's happened. I think that's one of the things that's contributed to that. But I do like that, because that was why I left traditional churches. And outside of like literally caring about truth, I'd still be in those churches if I didn't care about the truth, because they were comfortable. The ones that I was going to, you know, if they were the come as you are churches, you know. So we wore jeans. Even when I was a pastor, like I didn't wear suits. I'm like, why would I wear suits? Why? Why would I be uncomfortable? I'm not doing that. And we never told anybody what to wear, how to dress, or anything like that. I always felt like that was something that we left behind. So when I did come back to Maryland and saw that the majority of the churches, I'm like, what are y'all doing? Y'all like, it was odd to me.
Talking about Revelations, when it was like,
Oh yeah, he was talking about the end times, and I was like, what? We do this? We still talk about this stuff? I was like, man, I thought we left the Jack Van Impe stuff alone.
Yes.
All right, so let's jump into some of this. How did y'all get into ministry, and was it at two different times, or did you get in ministry at the same time? How does this journey happen? How do y'all become pastors before we get to the ex-pastors?
Yeah, so that started with me essentially. Although we both but we both became baptized as adult. Like we were married, and we were like, I was told by a family member, like, hey, if you want to stay together with your wife, you need God in the picture. It's the trifecta. The closer you are to God, I'm sure you guys have heard this before.
Yes.
So we were like, all right, I guess we need to have a relationship with God and be part of a church. And so we started looking into. We ended up at an evangelical, charismatic
mega church,
and there we got baptized. And shortly after, I'm like, I really want to. I love this preaching stuff. I'm interested in learning more about the Bible. They're like quoting Greek and stuff, and I don't know anything about that, so I want to learn. Got into Bible college, where I explored biblical studies, and then got transferred over to a bigger university, got a degree in Bible. I also got a degree in pre-medicine. I wanted to be a dentist, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
As I was working in dental offices, I started working as a dental assistant at age 18. So it was kind of like what I wanted to do growing up. But then come graduation, I turned to her. I'm like, hey, I think I want to go to seminary. Like, I don't know about this dental school stuff. I feel like I'm being called to ministry or something. And
Yes.
I would like to obey that calling. And, she fully supported that. And I ended up at Dallas Seminary. And then 5 years later, I'm graduating with a master's in biblical studies. And last semester, I had been tutoring a student in Hebrew, and we became friends. And he happened to be a pastor at a church close to where we lived. And he was like, hey, how would you like to be my associate pastor? And I was like, wow, sure. I haven't even graduated, but sure. And I took the job, and we uprooted our family from one side of the Metroplex to the other side, closer to that church there, and worked in ministry for about a year.
Wow.
In there. So yeah, that's where we had all these experiences that we can share a little more as we continue on. But essentially, it was at this one church, now already working full-time ministry, where I personally became like a little skeptical of what we were practicing, and then started like questioning and going on a educational journey, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to fill in a few details, like before, when we first met, we were both kind of new agey. We weren't that religious or anything. So it wasn't until we were married a few years that we started getting into religion together. And so the whole time I was not really that into all of it. Not in a bad way. I wasn't against it, but I just didn't push it on other people. I didn't feel like everybody else had to believe what I believed, type of thing. And I had studied abroad lots of places, so I had been exposed to lots of different cultures and religion and that kind of thing. So that was more my approach to it. Now I would invite people from time to time, but I didn't like believe that everybody that my way was the only way, type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's funny in the Spanish world, like it's almost goes hand in hand. And maybe even in the charismatic world, I've noticed it's always husband and wife calling. So
Yes.
it's almost like if it's not your calling, then it's not his calling, because God calls the couple together. And
Yep.
or even they would call me pastora, just because I'm his wife, I'm the pastor by default,
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I always definitely filled that role. Like when he was a pastor, every single weekend, we were hosting families in our home and, building relationships with people.
Well,
Literally every weekend.
Well before I was officially a pastor, because we held Bible studies at our home.
Wow.
We did that for about maybe 10 years altogether, I'd say.
Holy snap. Yeah.
And we had kids. And so, I mean, I think people would be surprised to learn that as a pastor, I think they think, oh, they're just preparing all week for the sermon and that's it. But
Right.
no, like Mark's working all day, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday is when you prepare for the sermon, but you're also preparing, the words that are going to go up on the screen, the lights, the music, make sure everything's all coordinated. So it's a production. And then you have Sunday, and, I was also on the worship team and volunteered in Sunday school. So our kids are like in the Sunday school class all day long for music practice, and then the actual 2 services, let's say. And then afterwards volunteering to, welcome new people and show them around. And it's like takes over your entire life to where you have no time for family or friends or anything.
Yep.
So,
I know that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when Mark left the church after that year, we were so burned out. We were like, let's just take time and rest and like not serve. And we loved it. We had so much more time with our kids. Like Sundays, eating a big breakfast at the table was so less stressful than like, hurry, get ready, let's go. And so we just loved it so much to where we took so long to start looking at other churches, but every other church we would visit after that, we could only see the production of it.
Yeah.
We had seen all the behind the scenes and what it took to get that. So that's all we could see after that.
Wow. It's funny because I do think that's one of those big things that people overlook, and probably one of the reasons why people are resistant to community once they come out is because volunteering in the religious world literally becomes like human sacrifice a lot of times.
Yes.
Like you feel uncomfortable saying no, even if other people like create the space and say, oh, you can take the time off. Because I know even as a pastor, there were plenty of times like people like, Pastor, you need a break. You need to go do this. And it's like, oh, that's nice, but get thee behind me, Satan. You save not the things of God. And whoever puts his hands to the plow and looks back is not fit for the kingdom. You give yourself all these types of scripts that that even when you're like, okay, I really need to say no, I really need to step away. And it's hard. Like, and then of course, when you do have unscrupulous pastors who know that, they're going to use it against you. If they know that it's your intention to be the best Christian you can be, and it's your intention to be the best servant of God you can be, they're damn sure going to take advantage of your time, And I saw a lot of it. So I know that's one of the things we try to be very careful about, even with the way we structure volunteering with what we're building, to where we set everything like on a time thing. Like, is it 2 hours a week you're doing, 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and whatever you set, don't go over that. That's the commitment you got to make to yourself. And it's also just a reminder that, when it comes to volunteering stuff, nobody really needs to be given 40 hours at a time. That's not what volunteering is for. And but that's what it becomes in the church. It's scary.
It's expected in some churches.
It is expected, yes.
Oh yeah, totally expected.
And one of the funny things Mark and I were talking about as we were kind of preparing, thinking back at old stories of when we're in church leadership, is like, what if you have a really bad volunteer or a rude volunteer? They're volunteering, like you can't fire them, and you don't want to have that tough conversation.
Now that I ran into a lot because I had some really bad volunteers. I had a church plant, so I started my church from the ground up, and didn't really have a lot of strategy when I was doing it because I was super charismatic, in the sense that I believe, if you pray that it will come, and God will do the rest. And so it took us a long time to get on our feet. But once we did, we had a bunch of volunteers, and every now and then people would complain about one and just be like, and it would be something non-volunteer related. So it'll be something like, well, hey, this person is sleeping around. And it's just like, what do you want me to do? Fire them? They're a volunteer. And the whole point they're volunteers because we kind of need them. It's not the other way around. And that was a struggle for me as a pastor, especially in those final years, because my theology, even before becoming an atheist, I think my theology about sin had separated by the time I was in high school. And by the time I was in high school, I no longer viewed sin as something that led to hell. I viewed sin as something that led to death. And it was different types of death. It could be a social death, spiritual death, physical death. So if you're eating things you're not supposed to do, you're killing things in your body. If you're mistreating people, you're killing those relationships. And so I had a very sociological relationship with my theology. So by the time I was pastoring, it was mind-blowing to me how obsessed some members became with other members' sins. It was, especially because I didn't preach that stuff. I was definitely like more of a grace preacher. I was, again, more people-centric. So I was the type of person, I don't care what you smoke. I don't care who you slept with. God loves you anyway. Our church was very theatric, very animated, and it was all about the drama of God's great love for you. And so it would always amaze to me when people would try to get volunteers fired. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how this works. But it was, that was weird for me.
we personally ran into a situation where I was the associate pastor, so there was the senior pastor above me. That when I was put in charge of the volunteer teams, I had to oversee several teams in the church. There was this one guy who was like one of the main volunteers. Like, this dude is a jack of all trades. Has been serving at the church. He did incredible things, building stuff and doing all kinds of stuff with his wife. But him and the pastor didn't like see eye to eye in some things. And he was like trying to make the case at like an elder meeting, like, hey, we need to get rid of this guy. Like, he was trying to push him away from the ministry.
Wow.
Because they didn't get along with each other.
Really, because he challenged the pastor on one thing.
Yep. Sounds about right.
And the reason why they decided, because I was at that meeting, the reason why they decided not to kick him out of the church, not just like as a volunteer, kick him out of the church, was because his wife was so involved, like in Sunday school, and so they were afraid to lose him and her. So then they decided against kicking him out. I'm like, I remember, like, are you guys? They all voted. They all went around and voted, and I'm like, are you serious for this reason?
Yeah.
Like,
where's the grace?
This is all about exactly. This is about the pastor's ego. That's it.
Yep. And that's funny because it was well, actually, now I go to my early years. I've served two egotistical pastors, and both were a nightmare. The first one, when I was 17 and 18, when I was with that one. And that one, I'll never forget, we were in a meeting, and he didn't like the way me and another one of the youth ministers had led a youth service. Wow. It had gotten really like animated, kids falling out and crying and people prophesying and stuff and speaking in tongues. And he wasn't at that service, so he didn't get the credit for that display.
Mm-hmm.
And so he literally came to the church and told all the youth leaders to stay after because he wanted to have a meeting. And so in this meeting, we all get in his office and he's talking about strange fire. And he says, I won't have strange fire permitted in my church. And, you know, me and my other youth minister friend, we're just being humble and taking the correction and the rebuke because we've obviously done something wrong. And until at one moment, and just to give you some context on me, I grew up in the hood. I know I don't talk like it and I don't sound like it, but when things rub me the wrong way, you might meet another person. Now, that's just a little context. It's not going to go that extreme. But in this meeting, he said, and it's a whole bunch of adults in there. Me and my other youth minister, we're the youngest people on the team. And he says, if we were in the streets, I'd kick you in your chest. Now, this time I'm 17. Like, yes. Like, and at that moment, I look up because, you know, I've been humble up to that moment. Like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Because you're the man of God and I don't want to touch God's anointing. But what you just said just kicked me all the way out of my distance. And so I look up and I'm looking around the room and everybody else is just like, that's right, Pastor. And so like I leaned over and I said, nigga, I wish you would. And then everybody looked at me like I was the one that did the wrong.
Like the street's right there.
Like, let's go. Like, oh my, like when this was a God thing, I was okay. You was rebuking me about God. I'm submissive. But the moment you threatened violence, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, but that was and here's the thing. I didn't leave that church after that. I actually went back and apologized to that pastor. I said, Pastor, I was out of line for saying that. I shouldn't have said that to you. You're the watcher. You're the keeper of my soul. You know, and I'm just like, oh, it wasn't until I was talking to a coworker one day, because I was working at Office Depot in the logistics department. And I was explaining to him one of the situations at the church and how I needed to be more submissive. And he went to one of those vineyard type churches, which were a lot more progressive than where I was. And he said, man, that sounds like abuse.
Wow.
And I just remember like almost crying within myself, like, damn, you're not wrong. Like, so I've definitely seen those ego trips. Like it can be amazing.
I have a similar story. So early on that ministry, I had an altercation with a guy who was on staff in charge of all things audio, visual, technical stuff, including a team of volunteers that would set up the stage and everything. So I was given the directive that next Sunday we were going to need choir risers on stage because we were going to have the choir on that particular service. And I was told, oh, just get in touch with that guy and, you know, he'll take care of you or he'll let you know whatever. So I get in touch with him and I say, hey, we're going to need choir risers next Sunday service. Is that cool? He's like, yes, no problem. So, but then he didn't tell me anything else. Coming to find out, when I get there on Sunday morning, there are no choir risers on stage. So I naturally send him a text and I was like, hey, what happened? The choir risers are not on stage. And he's like, what do you mean they're not on stage? And I was like, yeah, they're not. Oh, didn't you come get them? And I'm like, no. And he was like, well, you're supposed to come and get them. I was not going to leave. I was not going to do that for you. Like already like acting very defensively and rude.
Wow.
And so then I'm like, all right, I guess I'll go get him. But then I guess whatever I said ticked him off. And so then he ends up confronting me in person and he gets up on my face and he makes a fist like this close. Is like, blah, blah, blah. You don't like talk to me that way. And, you know, I wasn't going to bring him to you. And I was like, so in shock. Like, I'm thinking, all right, we had a misunderstanding. No problem. Next time I'll go get him. I know you're not going to have anyone bring them here. And but that was it. So then end of Sunday service, I told my senior pastor, I say, hey, by the way, I didn't want to say anything prior because we're like, leading service.
Yeah.
This happened, and I guess we had a misunderstanding, but this dude was so angry with me. He got defensive, got up on my face, made a fist. What's up with that? So then he's like, oh, really? Kind of like, oh, I'll get in touch with his manager and we'll sort this thing out. So then come Monday, I get called into, he says, hey, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to talk to his manager, who was the worship pastor, and we'll sort this out. Can you be there at 1:15 or something?
Ooh.
Like, sure. So I thought, hey, we're going to have some sort of powwow. But no, they had already been meeting well prior to the meeting time. There's just the three of them. My supervisor, the guy supervisor, and the other guy were already talking. And I get there, and they are actually surrounding the wagons on me. They made the whole thing to be about my character.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm basically the one to blame because I was trying to manipulate him into bringing choir risers for me when it was my responsibility to go get them, which was not something that was made clear to me. So I'm like,
he was
hey,
new.
I didn't get that. I'm new.
Wow.
Here it is, this lack of grace. And, not to mention somebody that I really should have assaulted. Like I should have defended myself.
Absolutely.
Like somebody puts a fist on your face.
Yes.
I mean, that's enough for me to like uppercut him. We're done.
Yeah.
But no, I'm a pastor. I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm not trying to like, already gain enemies here. So I just like, just accepted the situation and, moved on. I should have seen that as a major red flag.
Wow.
But,
And that's a trauma. Anytime that someone's threatening violence and you have to make like a fight or flight decision and you end up deciding to dehumanize yourself for them and give them the power, it leaves a mark.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something I did for years. The scenario you just gave, I had a very similar one. And it's always with Kenny. Like Kenny was troublemaker. But Kenny was my roommate at this time. And this time we were young adults by now, and we were still going to the same church. And Kenny had done something that the pastor didn't like. And I got a call from the executive assistant, because at this time I was the executive pastor of the church. So I get a call from the executive assistant, and they say, hey, they're going to have a meeting with Kenny. You should probably be there to support him. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'll be there. And so, and that's what it was. Kenny had a rap group at the church, and there was some conflict about a contract dispute or something. So I'm like, okay, I'll be there for support. I go to the meeting, and kind of like you just described, there was there's these conversations that seem to have been having long before this meeting. Mm-hmm. Because when I get there, everybody seems to be really focused on me. And, I was told that this meeting wasn't even about me, that it was about Kenny. And so once I get there, I get in, I sit down, Kenny never shows up. I start being asked questions about an event that I preached at. We heard that you preached over here. And I was like, yeah, I told everybody at the church, invited everybody. Yeah, but we heard you preached about the spirit of Jezebel. Well, I did. I preached about the spirit of Jezebel plenty of times. Well, somebody felt like you was talking about Pastor B, which was the pastor's wife. And I was just like, what? And at that moment, I actually looked around the room and I said, you know what? Kenny's not here. I was told this meeting was about Kenny. I feel like I've been brought here on false pretenses. I'm going to leave until the pastor calls me into a meeting. I literally had people physically try to restrain me into my seat to keep me from leaving that meeting. And like always, even though I did, eventually like, hey, get up off me, I still chose to sit back down and hear them out. And so just like that was constant for me for like almost 20 years of
Wow.
always feeling like I must be doing something wrong that I can't see, that I don't understand. I don't know enough, and these people must really be good, godly people. And so I should be careful about just thinking that they're jackasses. And so I allowed a lot of jackasses to be jackasses for a very long time. Yikes.
That's so interesting, because I think as a woman, I kind of thought that it was women who were struggling so much to be submissive, but to see that men too have to be submissive to God or church leadership and have that same struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's that whole turn the other cheek thing,
Right.
Yeah.
Submit.
Or God's teaching me a lesson. What must that be? Whatever that is.
Man. And it was, and that's definitely how I always internalized it, is that God is trying to teach me a lesson here, and I need to be humble enough to learn it. And then it was just like, no, this guy sucks as a teacher. So I'm leaving this class.
Yeah, that's what you realize afterwards. Like, no, you were right. You should have gone with your thought, but you should have more confidence in yourself.
Oh, because that's what you get robbed of. That is what you get robbed of.
Well, isn't that funny? You get told that God fights your battles, but when it's the battles in the church,
like he never showed up. Yeah, like I'm like, bro, please fight these battles for me, because I am getting bodied. Someone asked earlier, and I thought this was a good question, because I know I had some thoughts about it, and that was like, when you're pastoring a church, and I know it's a little different dynamic. How does it impact you when people leave the church, and in particularly when people who are either heavy servers or heavy givers? How does that play a role? What does that feel like?
Yeah, so for me, I was in charge of the numbers, right? Because they put that responsibility on that. All things new guests and membership, and that's your thing. You've got to grow that, because the main pastor needed to spend time preparing for the sermon.
That's right.
So for me, it was total. It was equal to failure. So if people are not coming to church, there must be something you're not doing right.
Yep.
And I just wanted to add too, I think it's a good insight in terms of behind the scenes that, Mark knows that they knew who were the biggest givers, who were the biggest servers, and that's where you put your most investment in. Let's have a celebration of volunteers, volunteer appreciation to keep those people, or the people who are the biggest givers. Hey, you're on our board, you're part of the decision making. So really, usually you don't lose those people. I can't think of any big people that we lost, because you're just so focused on new people, bringing them in, that you're not necessarily following up with those who just stopped showing up. And I think if you are in charge of church membership, you make a lot of excuses. Oh, it's summertime, people are on vacation. It's holidays, they're spending, watching football or with their families. And so you don't assume they left or know that they left necessarily.
Yeah. That just reminded me of the last big volunteer event we were a part of when we were in Birmingham.
Yes.
Did you want to share a little one? Because I know one of the stories you have from there of just seeing behind the scenes. Because again, we were part of urban churches. So the churches, or at least I was, when we got married, then she became a part of urban churches. But urban churches are happy-go-lucky. It's all about making people feel celebrated, making them feel warm. I like the type of churches where they made a big deal about people pulling up on the campus. So we're out there with cards. We're so glad you're here. Welcome. Stuff like that. And then you pull up and everybody's hugging you. They're like hug chains and stuff. And then the music is playing and people are diddy bopping around the campus and all that good stuff. So it was that type of church. And the pastor definitely had this, I don't want to say facade, but the pastor, the outward presentation is, oh, I love people. I love you all. You're so amazing. And we love people at this church. And then we had this huge volunteer event. And my wife, for the first time, saw like the backside of that. And it's something that so I'm gonna let you tell.
And I'm kind of like an introvert, but if you get to know me and I warm up to you, then I become more of an extrovert a little bit. But so in the volunteer function, I was kind of like quiet, I'll sit around. But there was a few people I knew, so I talked to them, and you kind of try to work your way around and say hi to everyone, see how they're doing. And so at that time, the pastor actually got a little bit more involved into, we had food outside. So it was getting close to nighttime. And he was helping prepare the food. We had to stand in line, and all the volunteers would come up to the table, and him and some other volunteers are making the burgers. And then he just was like, started going off like, hurry up. And then he cursed somebody out, and I forget why. He was cursing somebody out. They were moving too slow, not going too fast, and he was getting frustrated. And I was just like, oh, okay. It was just awkward because that was the moment I was coming up from my plate, and I was just like, okay, I don't need to eat. I'm okay. It's all right,
When she told me, I couldn't even be like, oh no, because I was just like, oh no, this is who he is. And I had known him for years because he was actually one of my mentors. So when I was actually pastoring my church, the church that I started, I would learn from him. I would go up to his church and learn from his team and his staff. And so when I resigned because I was an atheist, but I didn't tell anybody else that. I just told everybody else I was struggling with my faith. And so he wanted me to still stay a part of the church world. So he hired me at his church. And hired is a very interesting word to use there because there was a lot of that's a whole nother story. But I was in the office one day working at this church, and he comes in, and his assistant, he says, Leslie, I'm getting ready to go to this meeting. Who's supposed to be going with me? And it's this meeting that he was really excited about. And apparently he wanted to make a good impression. And Leslie said, oh, it's just you. And he said, so nobody else is going to the meeting with me? And she was like, well, no, I didn't know if you wanted anybody. Why would I go in there just by myself? I'm getting tired of working with you stupid motherfuckers. And he just walks out the room and slams the door. And everybody else is just like looking around. And I'm like, oh, he talking to y'all. Because I'm not going to be no stupid motherfucker now. That's not the game we play. I did resign from there a few months later, but it was rough. His armor bearer almost tried to kill him. Because he was so abusive to people.
And they got so used to it because even at the volunteer function, nobody stopped and was like, "Oh, Pastor, calm down. Why are you acting like this?" They were used. It's almost like immaturity, And so, and it's excused because this is pastor, so he's just frustrated in the moment,
A lot of urban pastors are D-level students who were class clowns all through high school. Those are a lot of the people that I've run into, and he was definitely one of those type of people, where like he joked on people on his team, sometimes just in incredibly dehumanizing ways, and it was just like, oh, it's just a part of the culture, so it's okay. But like it got so bad that he was talking about his armor bearer one time while he was driving, and the guy just slammed his foot on the gas and was like, "No, I'm not taking this anymore." But the sad thing is, just like me, that guy later came back and apologized. And said, I need to be able to take this. I know you're having bad days sometimes. And it's almost like Saul and David. And that's actually the language that gets used a lot. You know what I'm saying? Is that you got to learn how to serve your Saul until he becomes your Jonathan or Samuel or something like that. But it's, you're here to soothe those spirits out of him so that he can still be the man of God that he's supposed to be. It could be nightmarish.
And he's still there.
Oh, yeah. Church is doing well. Church is doing better than ever before. But those are the type of pastors who tend to do
so
well.
Frustrating. Yeah.
And you can't tell those guys anything because there's a verse somewhere that says, "Thou shalt not do anything to the Lord's anointed," or something.
That's
like
right.
That. You can't reprimand them or bring up anything.
And notice how the church has so many corporate functions, like a marketing team and all of that. But where's the HR? We need an HR.
Yes.
We have the finance team, the tech team, the lighting. And
no HR. No.
that's another thing Mark and I were talking about. Like, they have so many volunteers to their profit. Like, for example, it was usually somebody from the Spanish ministry that was translating the pastor's books into Spanish. So now he gets more sales, but he gets free translation services or free editing services. Or, in a mega church, it's a big deal to decorate for Christmas or for any of the holidays, Mother's Day. I mean, you need huge teams. Everyone knows how expensive interior decorating is, and you've got to change it up every week to keep it interesting and fun. And so they don't pay or invest money for those things, for the labor, but yet they did hire a professional company when it came to the fundraising campaign.
Yes.
I mean, brought in pros who had such a good message. I mean, made you feel so guilty, and had a very state-of-the-art program to have you set a specific amount that you were going to commit to and to hold you accountable. And Mark, I mean, even as pastors, was questioned on how much we were giving to the church. Like, they confronted him about it, and he was like, "Oh, my wife," because he's on stage, he doesn't have a chance to give when the plate's going around. But I was in the congregation or audience, and I was giving cash. So he was like, "Well, she gives cash," and they're like, "Oh." Like, they were looking for the check with your name to attribute to you. Yeah. And so, and I had no idea they were doing that. I'm just like, "Here, cash," like, but
yeah. And there was the whole
track.
fundraising thing for, I think they wanted $10 million. $10 million was the campaign to upgrade the church. And they made everyone do pledges. Like, there was a card, and there were different tiers and different payment plans. It was incredible. Like, they were so thorough with all that. And I was confronted, like, you guys are only going to do 12,000 or something like that.
Wow.
And they expected us to really up it, and it was so weird. Just like, what? Are you serious? Like, you're barely paying me enough to be here, much less now we got to return that money somehow, because where's that going to come from?
So, I think that was the mistake that my mentor made, is that he knew I was struggling with my faith, and we were living in DC when I made the decision to move back to Alabama and take the position. I was doing better financially than I had ever been in my life, which was the first time, because I was no longer depending on faith to pay my bills. So like, I was like actually working and working at places that were like real positions. And so when he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want you to stay as close to the faith as possible, and I want you to come back to work." And I was like, "Well, I actually do need to be back in Alabama because I need to be close to my kids. And right now the judge is acting crazy." And so it sounded good. And I said, "But the thing is now, I'm going to need to be paid. And my salary is a little higher now than it was when I was in Alabama, but I know the cost of living is different. So I'll ask, if you can just do," and about to hear my humility, "you can just do 40,000 a year. That'll be fine." And mind you, at that time, we have 4 kids. So yikes. So if you can do 40,000 a year, that'll be fine for me. And then we can roll from there. I think we were working at the church for 2 months before I ever got paid.
And he worked every day. He didn't get home 3 to 4 in the morning sometimes.
Wow.
And we'll be sleep like we were. It was
rough.
Yeah.
And I was doing my best to kind of endure it faithfully, because we had money when we moved down. So I was like, it's no big deal. Maybe they're working out the logistics. And I am that type of person. People consider me argumentative, but I'm actually quite, highly amenable. I don't argue unless it's absolutely necessary. And I don't like to rock the boat when it's unnecessary. So we got down there. We were living in a hotel, driving out of a rental car because we in DC. We did not need a car because of public transportation. So we're living out of a hotel, paying for that for 2 months, paying for the rental car for 2 months, to the point where we completely depleted our funds. And I remember when we were looking for a house when we first got there. We found a house. The rent was only $600 a month. It was enough space for all of our kids and had a garage. So we were like, "Oh, this will be perfect." And he said, "Oh, no son of mine is going to be living in that neighborhood. And I felt a little good. I was like, oh, because I had daddy issues at the time as well, because my dad isn't that great. But so I was like, oh man, this dude, you know, like he's showing me that he really cares for me, and he's saying that he's actually going to follow through.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, no, he literally said, I wouldn't have you living anywhere I wouldn't have my wife living. And I was like, oh, he's about to do us real good, because they lived in a gated community where everybody has like 4-story houses and basements and stuff.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, he's going to set us up. This is like this is just like the testing phase where he's just going to see if I'm going to stick with it. And I remember it was bothering me even before they moved us into an apartment. I remember it was bothering me because as I would show up to work every day, what we would do is we would spend like $600 to $800 on lunch every day. You just take us out. $600 to $800. Y'all get whatever y'all want. And at that time, I was working on my figure, you know, trying to get my figure right. So I wasn't eating a lot. And I would be like, why can't you just give me that? Instead of spending all this money on the lunch, just give me my cut of lunch daily, and that'll pay me. But they literally waited until we depleted all of our funds. We had no money left, and I had to come to him and say, hey, what's going on with me being paid? We don't have anything left. And his response, well, why didn't you tell me sooner? Bro, we've been here for 2 months. You were supposed to start paying me 2 months ago. And so they did start paying me $400 a week. I would say $10 an hour, but no, it wasn't $10 an hour. It was $400 a week because I worked in excess of 70 hours every week.
Oh, man.
While working, because obviously I couldn't afford to buy new clothes at this moment. We couldn't afford to get another car.
You had to walk in the heat.
They put us in an apartment that I still had to use the last of my money to pay for, and then they covered $200 of it. And the apartment was so broken down that when my assistant from the church is driving me home and he gets there and he sees the apartment complex, he looks over to me and he says, "Are you in trouble?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Are they punishing you?" And I'm like, and he wasn't wrong, because that's what it felt like.
Wow.
This man would literally say stuff in our leadership meetings like, "I got Darante and his family sleeping on the floor right now, because I want to see how his faith is." Like, he'd say stuff like,
"Oh my gosh."
It was an interesting experience. And then we'd be walking down the hall, because I'm the number 2 at the church. We'd be walking down the hall and he'd lean over to me, "Darante, you're gonna have to get some better clothes or I'm gonna have to fire you. Darante, you're gonna have to do something about your beard or I'm gonna have to fire you. Durante, you're gonna have to get a vehicle, or I'm gonna have to fire you." Mind you, a vehicle was another one of the things that they had promised. These were the things like, "Hey, we got," and it wasn't like, "We're gonna buy you a new vehicle." It was, "We have this vehicle. We're gonna go clean it up, and it's gonna be yours." Churches do it quite often.
Yeah.
Video never came. The vehicle never came. When we moved in the apartment, I had to walk to the church every day, and it was so it was rough. I have some trauma when it comes to
never
church.
again.
Never. Yeah, I resigned and sent an email to every single person on staff.
They were upset too.
Oh, he was livid. I think I may still have that letter of resignation.
And it's almost, how dare you leave and you write me this intelligent letter?
Yeah,
you know.
So I just wanted it to be clear, and I wasn't disrespectful, because I don't necessarily feel that need in most cases. I just want to articulate why it is that I'm not being here, and even then I was still being nice. Like, oh my goodness, because I described myself back then as an atheist with a Christian heart, so I still wanted to do the Christ-like thing, and so it was just like, I'm leaving to preserve our relationship. That's the way that I closed it. I highlighted a few things that were problematic for me. And I said, I'm resigning so that we can still preserve our relationship. Because if I stay here, we're not going to have a relationship after this. Because there's a whole fool in me. And if you poke that bear too much, it gets ugly. And then all that trauma comes out. And I don't know what to do for you. I can't help it. You did it. You poked the bear, jumped in and found out. All right, I've talked. I'm not allowed to time.
No, that was so good and so bold of you. And that's huge, because like, with Mark's situation, they let him go for reasons you could explain, but they lied about it. They said that Mark was the one leaving to pursue other interests.
Wow.
And, you know, there's all about the truth, but they don't actually want to hear the truth, right? In your case and in ours.
Yeah. I think one aspect of your story that maybe perhaps we have in common is how some of these pastors, they're just master manipulators, and they want to control every situation. And it's when they're not controlling a situation when they get really defensive
Yes.
and act out in ways that are like so like unbiblical, you know. And for me, I had one of those experiences too, because, well, at least in my case, the pastor ends up letting me go because of some reason, like, oh, next year we really want to hire a full-time worship pastor, and there's just not enough budget for both an associate pastor and a full-time worship minister. And so, sorry, we hope you stick around. We do want you in the ministry, but we're just not going to be able to have you on staff. And I was like, oh, wow, and really broke my heart. But I sort of like came to terms with it. But when he came to, so after this meeting where I was just told that I'm being let go, he's like, oh, but here's what we want you to say. And so they handed me a piece of paper. It was a letter by me, apparently, which I had nothing to do with it. So I'm reading this message, and it's like, I am admitting that I'm resigning. It's not that they're letting me go, but that I'm resigning to pursue, because I want to pursue other interests. And I think part of like how I came across is that I was really more into wanting to teach the Bible. My heart was really becoming a professor, but here I am in ministry. And so I don't know if he just sort of cling into that and made me say that in front of everybody up on stage. Wow. And I went along with it. I know, like, when I shared that with Anne, she was highly disturbed and did not want to have any part with that. But nonetheless, we all end up on Sunday, and I'm reading this thing saying goodbye. And I'm lying for the church because they won't admit the truth in front of everybody. Wow. And that's broke my spirit, having to experience that, because, you know, they want to control the message.
It was embarrassing and such a conflict of how we were feeling, because I kind of felt like kicked out, because, you know, I was also on the worship team and Sunday school, and we were dedicating so much time. And, you know, it felt like a rejection. And they're like, but you can still keep coming to the church. And we were like, no, like, that's terrible. But anyway, I remember when he was announcing his resignation, they had us, like, me in the back, and, you know, you can come say whatever. And I was bawling. Like, it's not like, oh, we're moving on, we're pursuing other efforts. Like, no, we're feeling rejected, and I'm bawling. And it was just so not congruent with what the reality was.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's yikes. That rejection factor is big. I know I wrestled with that, especially in my younger years coming up, and obviously through some of my adult years too. But I just remember how prevalent it was in my younger years, because again, I had daddy issues. My father wasn't there. And then the central figure of Christianity is a father, which is why it becomes so attractive. And then you kind of, in a way of vicarhood, you transfer that over to pastor. And the pastor becomes a spiritual father. And so that was my relationship with every pastor I had. This person was a spiritual father, a surrogate father, if you will, who's standing in my life. And that's how I tried to treat them. And so every time I'd go through something where one of these mentor figures was rejecting me for one reason or another, it would be incredibly hurtful. And it was, I remember one, and this is when I graduated high school. I was a part of a large charismatic church in Ozark, and the pastor died, which shook the hell out of me, because we were a church that believed God raised the dead, and that our pastor was the type of person who could raise the dead. So how did he die? And also he was just like, hindsight 2020 maybe wasn't that great, but back then I thought he was awesome. Like I thought he was the best thing ever. He was an Italian guy from Chicago, and like he had trimmed himself up really stylish, like he looked like he could have been in the mob. And that was like, I don't know why that was appealing to me. Like I want a pastor, and I guess that's a part of that toxic masculinity that you get in a lot of evangelical churches. I think that was that image there. Like Pastor David was a man's man. And that was I think that's the kind of way I saw it. But he also had all of this authority over the devil, like, and we were this tiny little community, and he had this large church, and he would lay hands on people and heal them of unverifiable diseases. And so it would be all types of cool things. And so he died, and my world kind of shattered for a moment, partly because we were in this series when he died about healing. Yeah, I think it was called like the Law of Life in Christ Jesus, the Law of Liberty of Life in Christ Jesus. He had the longest sermon series ever. And in this series, that's all he was doing, was walking around, talking, and then healing people. And then in the middle of the series, he dies. And nobody in the church tried to raise him up from the dead. And that was just like, wait a minute.
You said.
Y'all said y'all believed this. I believed it because you believed it. I've attached my faith to this. I've attached my identity to this type of belief system. And the man just died. And this is the perfect opportunity for us to prove that we know what we're talking about. And nobody even tried. And I just remember that, like, that was wrecking. And that wasn't the point of this story, but it was wrecking for me, because I was like, do they know that they don't believe it then? Are they just saying it because it feels good to say on Sunday? Because for the fact for nobody to try, but yet we preach this so loudly, that was hard for me. But my mentor at the time, who knew I was very close to the pastor, he and I got a little closer. And then he ended up giving me some advice. And he said, you know what? I think it's going to be good for you to go to this other pastor's church, which was a former associate pastor at our church who had left to start his own church. And he said, because now we're going to be looking for a new pastor. No one's going to be able to really mentor you the way that you're going to need to be mentored. So it's probably going to be best if you be a part of a smaller church. And I was like, cool, sure, I'll go check out the other church. And then something ended up happening where he called me one day and just like snapped and goes off and is like, we don't want you coming back to the church anymore. And I was like, what did I do? Well, if you don't know, then you don't need to know. And that was horrible for me, because then I'm like, and so you're literally not telling me what I did wrong. And it's like, and I was still in that childish place in my head, like, no, please tell me, I'll fix it, whatever, please, And so you not giving me the opportunity to fix it felt like torture.
Yeah.
It felt like torture. Even worse, I ended up going to the other church. That was the pastor who threatened to kick me in the chest. Stayed at his church for years. It turns out much of that pastor's ill treatment of me came from a phone call he got from my mentor, who sent me to his church. Stuff that I didn't even learn until years later, because we're on speaking terms now. But years later, he was like, yeah, Sam called me and told me this about you, this about you, this about you, this about you. And I was like, Sam is the one that told me to come to your church. And
wow.
It was rough. It was
foolishness.
I set you up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yikes. Okay, let me get this.
Yes.
Not to mention how when pastors are let go, generally the assumption, especially in cases where it's not made explicit as to why, it's that there's a sin problem or an infidelity or something really scandalous, and that's why they're being let go, but not because they're human beings that do crazy, shady stuff sometimes.
Yep.
Right?
Right.
That's true. And then you have these corrupt, abusive people staying in power so long. And meanwhile, they're getting rid of like people who are serving their hearts out for stupid little things or confronting them. It's
yes.
so hurtful. I one thing I was going to add too is that the whole, putting so much emphasis on prayer and healing also messes with your mind when it doesn't happen. Like it made me think about somebody in the church who she had gained weight, and she was saying that, you know, it's her fault because when she was skinny and people were like, oh, you know, how are you so skinny? Or how did you lose weight? That she wasn't giving credit to God. She was saying, oh, you know, I'm on this diet or working out or whatever. And so now, and she was like in her 50s. So it's like common that you're going to have hormonal changes, you're going to gain some weight. But she was thinking, beating herself up, thinking that it was because she didn't give God the credit when she was slim. And so it's just things like that you don't realize. Like you think that you're bringing hope to people and healing, but it's really a false hope that can be so toxic.
Yeah.
That's, oh man. Yeah.
And
Like, so God is making me big. God is
Yeah.
punishing me by, oh man.
but the
that's
fact
wrong.
that we would have those thoughts, those negative thoughts, that God would be that toxic, and we accept that because we like, oh, that's how it should be because we're such sinners. Or
Yeah.
we're less than, you know, and so that is very harmful even for children to grow up in that, because that's how you get a lot of depression or mental issues, or just anything that your adult child does wrong. You know, you call, some people call them names, or you may kick your teenage child, and it's like, no, they're learning. And so we lose that that humanity, being a part of that, you know.
I have a question for y'all, because as Mark and I were reminiscing on different stories, we kind of noticed, and I want to ask you guys if y'all had a similar experience. So of course, you know, we talked about how they're wanting to desexualize everything, but I thought it was interesting that I felt like there was too much questions around our sex life in general, like small groups, our small group pastor, how's your sex life going? And I remember us being like we're good, like why are you asking? And then you know, Mark was an associate pastor, he had the pastor, and you know, one behind the scenes, I think people think that pastor and associate pastor are besties and like having lunch together, and that wasn't the case. They weren't great friends. But yet he tried to really pry, how's your sex life going, and how's this? And it's like, this shit was just weird.
It was so
you don't get that.
It felt very fabricated, like fabricated intimacy is how I think of it, because he would like try to volunteer something about his own personal relationship with his wife to see like, all right, maybe he'll feel comfortable sharing something back. And when I sort of picked up on that, I'm like, he would ask me, so how's everything going? It's like, it's fine. It's like, really? So then he started looking at me suspicious that nothing is happening between my wife and I.
Yeah. Yes.
It just felt so weird. Like you're just trying to for me to confess something. Like I'm struggling with pornography. I don't know what else you wanted to hear. You manipulate me and use that information against me, you know?
Wow. Did you run into that a lot? Because I definitely have some thoughts.
Not necessarily people asking about our intimate life or anything like that, but I think people do try to. We run into where they try to pry to get something, because some of my family members go to really small churches, and I know that small churches, if they learn something about you or what's going in your life, they're going to take that and just add it into the sermon. So they may not have a sermon before, but they hear something the day before, it's going to become about you. And so we had issues of like questions and sometimes rumors of, even when we moved, like I'm from up north, and so when I moved to Alabama, it became an issue. When we was in Birmingham, and then we ended up being in Anniston. You know, it was just a lot of that. Not so much the intimacy out.
Yeah. See, sex has always been a major part of the conversation for me in the church world, and that's partly because I got started so young, and that's the number one message to the youth group.
Yeah, I think for sure when we were younger.
Yes.
The True Love Waits conferences we had to go to, and
culture.
As far as virginity, but once we were married.
Yeah. Well, not for you. but I'm gonna take you there because I think it does come from I think it does tie into that youth culture because the reason why almost if there is a youth conference, sex is being talked about at that youth
for sure.
because the assumption is that the youth must be violating this law and having sex. And I think that becomes the assumption that a lot of people take on in the ministry is that everybody must be out there doing something sexually they ain't supposed to be doing. And we've got to help them not do those bad things sexually. And then for the seeker-friendly church, we took it a whole nother direction because we got so disgusted by how sex had been demonized in the traditional churches that we decided to make sex fun and popular again. And I was on
God
that
invented sex.
Yes, that's right. I remember when Ted Haggard put a bed on top of his church and him and his wife slept in the bed. Like, I'm not even talking about on the platform, I'm talking about on the building, you know, to push this conversation that Christian sex is awesome. And it was like, Christians have the best sex. It was a real conversation. And then, of course, a few months later, he got arrested for doing drugs and for having gay sex. And so, like, that was a big situation.
Oh, yeah.
He's not a Christian state. Oprah did a big thing on it. But no, I remember it being a big thing. And I remember as a pastor having to wrestle with it because we didn't talk about a lot of things. I know one of my other mentors, Dr. Vernon, to this day preaches against pornography and stuff. And I remember when I was a pastor, I just thought that was a real weird thing to preach against. And like out of all the things that happened. But like anytime Dr. Vernon was around the men, he was always going to talk about pornography. He was always going to talk about protecting yourselves on Instagram. And the thing that actually bothered me about that type of conversation is that I found it incredibly patronizing because it almost came across as you're a man. If you see, you know, a half naked woman, you're not going to be able to help yourself, but not to look away. And I was just like, I think this is kind of lowering the standard a little bit, you know, and so that bothered me. But there was pressure for us to actually, in the urban churches, to actually at least preach one series about sex a year. And I remember thinking, because some of my other pastor friends were like, y'all aren't talking about this stuff in small groups yet? And I was like, oh, God. So I said, you know what? I'm going to get some of the men together in my church and we're going to sit down and we're going to have the sex conversation. It was the most awkward moment in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we never did it again.
And it's almost, I saw it more of a way as of fishing to find problems, like just how they prey on financial problems or marriage problems or parenting problem with your kids. Like there's always going to be in your lifetime problems in those areas or things that you're working out, but they're trying to like infiltrate every aspect of your life.
Yes.
To bring you to God, to address those needs through the church.
It's kind of like a couple. I have a cousin and his wife. They're very religious, and I just learned last night that they have a thing where they don't watch any movies made after the year 2000. I'm almost sure that it has to do with religious purposes and stuff like that.
They're too woke now.
Yeah.
Too equal.
Do you remember? Early on, before we were in ministry, we were attending a singles ministry when we were just newlyweds. There was this singles ministry guy. He was the very hip, well-dressed dude, cool hair, and he'd always be preaching all that sexual purity and all that stuff before marriage, abstain, blah blah blah. Well, coming to find out later, he actually was let go of the ministry because he cheated on his wife with his assistant at the church. And it was this huge controversy.
Wow. Yeah. Oh man.
That's what I was gonna bring up when becoming a pastor's wife, which us being married came towards the end of Darante's pastoral, so on that side. So it was very easy for me to smooth in because we met in 9th grade and he started a prayer group. And back then I was like, okay, he's way too deep. He's way too serious in this. You know, I'm more so what he would call culturally Christians. Like go through the motions or going to church because my mom went to church, her family went to church. But I knew I was like, you know, I always had the notion like if there is a God, I would want to live right and, you know, be the good person, the kind person, and pass on. But if there's not, I still want to be good, you know, and treat people right. And so the fact that I had the if already brought that up. But fast forward to where we are now, being married to Darante and the pastor, it does come into question like who he's around at the time, or who his specific assistants are, who's on the choir, if it's any other woman, you know, and it could be women that Darante will even be attracted to, and people like, oh, you got to watch out for this one and this one. But he was always mindful. He always told me, you know, when he picked assistants, he picked the opposite of what he would be.
And that was, I don't live by that advice anymore because it's so condescending, but that's what I had got from Dr. Vernon. Like Dr. Vernon had taught me that. And I thought it was the most honorable thing in the world when I first heard it. And he was like, yep, I only hire ugly old fat ladies for my assistant. And it was like, oh, how honorable of you. And he said, this is the way that I keep from cheating on my wife. And it's just like, now, like after I deconverted, I'm like, oh, that's saying a lot. That's, you know, that's
what you have to do to keep you from cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Where's the Holy Spirit?
Oh, yikes. Dang. Got him. Okay. Man.
Yeah.
Man.
But I will say
Good.
being married to Darante is definitely been a great ride, because early on when we got married, he was already on the fence, because when we came into being married, he was ended, you know, closed the church. Yeah. And he was like, you know, I'm really thinking about going around being a hoe.
I did say that. I said, I think I'm just going to be a hoe for a while.
Like, it's not working.
I've never tried that. I'd like to see how that goes.
When I came along, I had to reel him.
That is a roller coaster ride.
I didn't do it, but it was the first time I could ever be honest about like that's how I feel and just say stuff. And so I was exploring all different types of things. I literally did. Like I had a meeting with 2 of my former staff members right after I resigned. And I said, there are so many preachers out here that are just going around and just doing whatever the hell they want to do. Why don't I just become one of them? Yeah. I didn't. But I was exploring everything. I was like, man, I've stayed away from sales my whole life because I thought sales were sinful and slick. And so I'm like, I think I might want to get into sales. And then I was like, wait a minute. I've remained sexually pure my whole life. This might be a good opportunity to test the waters. And so it was like, I was like having a mind exploration moment.
Yeah.
The one thing that was clear to me was that I didn't know who the fuck I was. And it was like I was really trying to figure it out. And I had made the decision in 2014 that I needed to remove judgment. And so that's what you got. Like you got that whole year. It was like, let me figure this out and let me remove the condemnation that I've attached to things, away from those things, just so I can find me. Because that was very important.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I did not become a hoe. I did not go and sleep around with a lot of people. I could have. Don't blame anybody if you've done it. Hey, live your life. But I did not. Instead, I got married a few months later.
Yeah, but I love how honest you always were, like in the journey. And I let him go through his process and journey, because he told me, you can divorce me if you want, because I think I'm leaning further away to. And I'm like, boy, you come to me with, because I thought it was so petty. I'm like, to divorce somebody over differences, or you may you're learning, you're growing and evolving, and you're coming to new conclusions, you're getting new information. That's how
you know she wasn't a real Christian.
Why would I?
You know what I'm saying? She would have came to me. I was like, oh, we got a divorce. Got to get this.
She was a liberal Christian. One of the liberals.
Well, that's what happened with Mark and I too, because I came to him. He was still very much a believer, hardcore believer. And I
Wow.
was like, I think I'm questioning my faith. And he was like, get away from me. What is it?
Get behind me,
Behind me,
Satan.
Satan.
Yep.
And
That would have been my response, babe.
And I told him, then you're going to have to leave me because that's where I
Wow.
am right now.
Yeah. So I used to be a 5-point Calvinist, and one of those points was that there's unconditional election in the sense that in order for anyone to be a believer, God must have preordained your belief before creation. And so I'm a believer. That means God had my experience, my conversion in mind. And so therefore, if you are no longer a believer, does that mean God never chose you?
Oh,
And
yes.
it's, are you gonna go to hell and I'm not? Like, how's that gonna work out? Those were the thoughts going through my mind at the beginning.
And that's a real thing. You can go ahead. Oh my goodness.
Then, Mark just got his bachelor's degree and master's degree, speaks, biblical Hebrew, Greek. And so he's just like, no, like, just trust me. It's true. Like, I know more.
Believe me.
Just believe me. And I'm like, no. Thinking for myself. So yeah, it was a huge challenge to who he was,
Oh wow. I am, oh man, like, and that has me at this place of where you really do realize how traumatic this is with familial issues. Cause that was one of the things that I was wrestling with when I was fully deconverting. Is one of the thoughts I had was, this religion isn't really healthy for families. And for my community, that's kind of a big deal. We need functional families, and our communities have been broken for a while. And then I start kind of exploring, because the narrative is always very clear. Sin is killing our community. That's always the narrative, at least, and that's what I believed. Which is one of the reasons I became a pastor, is because I want my community to be healthier. But then I start paying attention, and I'm like, well, no, maybe it's having people kick their kids out for being sexually active. Maybe that's destroying communities.
Yeah.
Maybe having people disown their kids for identifying differently. Maybe that's destroying communities.
Wow.
Maybe giving people the reason, giving parents an excuse to dehumanize their kids, or not even just the kids, but other family members. I've seen people divorce their spouses over things that were, like, when I say superficial, I'm talking about superficial. It wasn't like, it was stuff where people come to me, I love my husband so much, Pastor. He's one of the best people to me in the world, but he doesn't come to this church and I can't be with him. And I'm like, holy crap. And in 2014, paying attention to all of that, it was just like, and I remember kind of having this conversation to myself. It was like, if there is a God, he can't care about people. Like, there's just no way. Because like, if like, to me, that's like being a boss and you have employees, and your employees are supposed to be working by your playbook, and you see that they're not operating according to your playbook, and it's causing harm. As a boss, you want to intervene for the health of your company. And I never see God do that. It's like, so not only are you a horrible father, you suck at the boss too. Like, there's just no way around this thing.
Yeah.
But it was eye-opening for me, because, and of course, it wasn't even eye-opening. I have seen all of these things and wrestled with all of these things throughout my entire journey. But it wasn't until 2014 that I allowed myself to sit down and say, let's look at it for what it is. Let's call a spade a spade. And it was one of those places where my life was just kind of in shambles. My first marriage was over. My church was in decline. My familial life, as far as I just had a very traumatic experience with my father. And so like I was shaken up, and I just graduated with my first degree, and none of my family showed up to the graduation, which is, that was constant for my life. And so, but by that time, it was like, dude, how many more years are you going to go and let your life kind of stay on this same track? You know, when it was going that way as a child, it was like, oh, it's other family members. It's because your mom is a drug addict that life is like this. When I got saved, it became, oh, it's because you haven't served the Lord enough that your life is like this. So after serving the Lord for 2 decades, I was like, oh, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
I'm still in the same place. This is still the same struggles. I'm still wrestling with the same trauma. As a matter of fact, I may be less healthier now. And so I was like, I can't afford to keep going this direction. I need to sit down and kind of lay all this stuff out on the table. And it was a relief afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like seeing everything, because I always kind of tell people I was deconstructing the whole time. I just didn't know it. I didn't know that's what the word was. But it was a deconstructing journey for 20 plus years. Yeah. And so when I did come to that moment where I gave myself permission to kind of like just truthfully engage with those past 20 years, it was a relief. Obviously, there was a little bit of grief, but my grief was I wasted my life. I wasted my time. I robbed myself of agency. I robbed myself of autonomy. I stood by and watched things that I knew were wrong and felt that it was justifiable because of this or that. That was the grief. But then the relief came right after that. And it was just like, oh, but you don't have to do any of this shit anymore.
You can take over.
You can, and it wasn't, I know for some people, it's like a long process after that. For me, that was it. The only hard part, and I don't want to say it was a hard part, I didn't have that word in my lexicon for real. I didn't call myself an atheist. That day I said I no longer believe in God. It took me like five or 7 years before I was willing to call myself an actual atheist.
Yeah, it's a journey. So like I mentioned, I was the one questioning first, but actually Mark was the one who became an atheist first, and I was still hanging on to some aspects of spiritual things. So yeah, you kind of have to like unravel each little thread until there's nothing left to hang on to.
Well, I was reminded of a story. I'll leave you with this. This will be my last one. So one of those moments that I felt let down by the church while working in ministry.
Yes.
Was I forget her name now. It's been a long time, but there's one lady that was employed by the church. She was like the main cleaning lady. And prior to me working in ministry, I had already been working in the dental industry. So I was very familiar with all things dental. And so I took a special interest on her teeth because she didn't have any from like eye tooth to eye tooth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she was an older lady, but not too old. But, you know, she would always like, you know, cover her face, and you could tell that she was very self-conscious about like her mouth. And so I took a special interest, as I said, and I remember being terribly disappointed because I went to my senior pastor and I say, hey, you know, so and so, like her teeth, and it's like, you know, I worked in that industry, and she just kind of needs maybe, you know, a pair of dentures, like that will change her life for the better dramatically. But, you know, and it's like, is there anything we could do? Can we start a fundraiser? And they were like, no, we don't do that kind of thing. Our business is the gospel.
Wow.
And sorry, you know, and I just felt very disappointed just by the fact that it was just like it didn't faze him. Like it was not
at all.
Like nothing. Yeah. Like that's not what we care about. So,
you know what was crazy, Mark? You and I have so many stories in common, because I do remember a few times where I wanted to do something to help somebody, and the pastor was definitely like, "No, that's not. We don't." And almost those exact same words, like that's not what we do. You know, like something else will handle that. And then I just remember one of the staff members when we were in Birmingham was going through a really hard time financially, and like he was about to go to jail for being behind on his child support. And so he was calling other ministers in the church, asking for prayer, asking for support, and obviously asking for financial help. The pastor literally called every man on the staff and said, I forbid you from helping him.
Yeah.
Like it was.
And this is a person who served.
Yeah.
You know?
Like it was rough. And I wish I could say that was the first time I had seen behavior like that. But I remember long before I had actually started working at that church, I used to go up there and visit him and hang out with him a little bit. And we were hanging out one day, and we had a mutual friend who had got scammed by somebody who was recommended to him by somebody in our little ministry group. But he was also a pastor, and it was like somebody who was going to come in and tell his church how they could fix their credit and do all these types of things with their taxes and stuff. And so he brought the guy in to come in and do this church stuff. And a few months later, he was being interrogated by the FBI. And so his whole life was falling apart. And so my mentor and him shared the same other mentor, which was Dr. Vernon. Oh, Dr. Vernon's going to be mad at me. He'll get over it. It won't be the first time. So Dr. Vernon had called my mentor while we were in the car and said, hey, has such and such called you yet? And he was like, no, he hasn't. He said, listen, he's going through something right now with the FBI. Stay away from that. Don't answer his calls. And it was just, I was so flabbergasted, because ministry to me was always about family. It was always about brotherhood. It was always about we're brothers and sisters in Christ, in the Lord. And for me watching these people just treat each other this way. And like, I have horror stories on that for days. But like, it was heartbreaking, because the person that they were talking about was actually a close friend, and it was someone that I knew that my mentor treated as a close friend, and he actually didn't do anything wrong. His name was cleared. It was someone in that other mentor's fellowship who had recommended this person to his church, and they just treated it like, oh, nope, hands off. He's going through a hard time. We don't want to be touched by that. And so they literally treated him like he had a scarlet letter on his chest.
The plague.
Yes. It was horrible. It was horrible. Now, listen, we've had a great time today. We got to get y'all back here. Like,
so many stories.
What?
Yes, we would love that.
Yeah.
Before we leave, I want to ask y'all, so what do you do now? Now that you're out of ministry, now that you're no longer pastoring, you're no longer leading worship, and I did see that you're still doing music stuff, because I saw you do the song, was that for the ACA?
In Spanish, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
The theme song for the Atheist Experience. Shelley Segal's. She's the composer and artist. And she gave us permission to do the same and translate the song and then make it. And so we did.
But Mark and I just wrote a song in English. And so we're in the process of putting together an arrangement. And then hopefully I want to do a little video.
Yes.
So that's something we're working on now. But mainly we work on the channel Apostate of Mind on YouTube. And because Mark's background is in biblical theology, we like to kind of dig deep into the academic side of the Bible to show how it's not literally true. And so that's mainly what we do. Anything you want to add to that, honey?
Well, we're also doing things in person now with Metroplex Atheists and Fellowship of Free Thought. We do a talk on reasons why the Bible isn't a credible source of history.
Wow.
And the reasons why we don't accept the Bible to be like this infallible truth, book. And so we do that. Professionally, though, I was fortunate enough that once I quit ministry, I was able to fall back on my background in dentistry as an administrator, and still working on that. I'm fortunate to be able to serve my community that way. And and I say that because there are many pastors that have had nothing to fall back on.
Yes.
In terms of profession and everything, and it's really hard. I'm fortunate that was not my case.
That is awesome.
And I've been working 20 years in medical sales.
Ooh.
Professionally.
That's money.
Yeah.
That is medical sales that's money in debt. It's money in debt. It's like everything else.
I enjoy it a lot. I really do. And I think it's helped me in my deconstruction process, because my training is, taking studies and breaking it down. And there's a lot of standards that have to be set with publications in the medical world. And so just applying those same standards to other beliefs that I have has helped.
That is
like
awesome.
that.
That is
That's
amazing.
awesome.
This has been delightful. I cannot believe we
Yes.
went a full 2 hours today, but and it doesn't even
Yeah,
feel like it was
right.
2 hours.
Not at all. So
Oh,
fun.
man.
And I just want to say too, I'm looking forward to seeing your content that you mentioned at the beginning. Y'all are doing great things and
Oh, thank
such
you.
interesting content, and we're fans.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
And likewise, like
Yeah.
we definitely look forward to collaborating more. This was very refreshing for me. Brought up a lot of triggering stuff for me as well. Some things that I haven't even thought about in a while. And so I actually want to do this particular one again. But not only that, I definitely want to expand into some other conversations. So we're definitely going to be finding some ways to work together over the years. So as we're closing out, I'm gonna take y'all from the screen, and I'll jump backstage with y'all in a few, and we will close out today's announcements. Everybody say bye to Mark and Ann Peralta of Apostate of Mind. Please make them feel so welcome for being here with us today. This was an amazing conversation.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so babe, do you want to close us out with stuff? Because
yes. On the screen we have Apostate of Mind, YouTube. Make sure y'all go subscribe, watch their previous videos, get engaged there. They're doing great work as well. It is just a pleasure to continue to add to the community and support each other for those who are doing the work to help others, and also to learn and grow from other experiences. And if you haven't already, be sure to like today's video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell if you haven't already. And we saw some new people in the chat. Black and Bougie, thank you for joining us and finding this channel. She had just found it today, I believe. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Kai. Thank you, Sharon, Alyssa, Dale, Kenny, just twin. Everybody, Maya jumped in. We appreciate everyone who has been supporting us on these Sunday sessions.
Yes.
We've been really enjoying the interactions and conversation. Also, again, consider joining us again next week. We'll be starting
Trust Issues.
a new series, Trust Issues. Let me throw it up really quickly.
I should have been over there to pull it up.
Really quickly, we're going to be starting
a
new topic next week. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Also, Wednesday, Bible study with the ex-pastor is at his regular time. So catch that at 5 Central.
And of course, Jason from Dragons and Genesis is going to be back with us. And so these conversations have been awesome. I've been enjoying those.
Yes, absolutely. And also, if you haven't already, check out our merch. Again, we have the discount link that we put in the chat. It's FAQ Sunday. You get 20% off. And we do have the Poor Fella hoodies out. So go check that out in different colors. And we have more to come, right, Boo?
Absolutely.
More to come.
Absolutely.
All right. Share with everybody you can. We definitely appreciate that. Hey, and listen, if you're interested in supporting us financially, and those who already have, thank you. We appreciate you so much. But there's plenty ways to do so. You can join our Patreon. You can become a YouTube member. You can give super chats, super thanks. We appreciate it. You can even cash app Darante when you want to give a love offering, if you will. You can bless them that way, all right? And we definitely appreciate the financial support as well, because it helps us improve the quality of the content and the quantity of the content for the channel. We have some volunteers that's helping us out with production in the future. So
volunteers.
Yeah, we're looking to add some spice, some more creativity in what we do. And so that definitely helps as well. And it also helps us develop support resources that we can distribute, networks and projects, and accelerate people-centric community and development. Right.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that. Not only does it help us increase quality, it also just just volunteering aspects. It just helps us create space. I think one of the many overlooked things that I had an awesome opportunity when talking to Patty yesterday, who's going to be volunteering with us for administrative stuff. And yes, thank you for video chat, meet and greet, and Discord in about 15 minutes. But just the idea that one of the things that churches did well that I think secular communities can learn from was creating space for people to do things that were important to them weekly and frequently. And so some of those overlooked things are often stuff like music, stuff like event planning, stuff like hospitality. And those are things that you can create space for people with. I know when I was a pastor, I became very intentional about that, especially the last 5 years of making sure that that when people were volunteering at Kingdom Central, that it wasn't just they were volunteering for me, but that this is something that is helping you in your life. So the people who were on our music team, most of them were serious about building their music career and their music repertoire. And so they got to practice every week, or some of them were people who wanted to be serious about music. But there wasn't anything in the community that they can join where they were singing music that they'd actually like and stuff like that. But then also my volunteers who were in like different management roles, which often isn't a word that gets used in churches, but we did. So like my people were CFOs, chief of staff, stuff like that, because I wanted them to learn and I wanted them to be able to use that information. And that's just when community is organized properly, it becomes free education and free training for other people. You know what I'm saying? For me, the majority of my music education comes from the church. I am a prolific singer, writer. I can rap a little bit. I play the piano. I can play the drums. I can play the guitar. Don't pay me to play the guitar, but I can. But much of that experience comes because I was going to church every week. Would it have been nice to have somewhere else that I could have been going to get some of that same time and be able to do some of those same things? Absolutely. And that's one of those things that I do try to remind us of as a community. All right, that's it. I'm through.
Absolutely. We won't hold y'all any longer. If you need the link to our Discord, I'm going to drop it in the chat. So for those who want to join the video chat meet and greet, you can. Also, we do have forms where you can accept the invitation. We call this Bridge City Global. Here we connect with everyone. If you want to get connected and stay connected with us, please feel free to fill out the form, visit our website. We definitely appreciate that. So I'm going to drop that in the chat as well. And just, you can let us know if there's any requests or any suggestions. Please feel free to let us know as well.
Awesome. All right.
Well,
is that it?
That's it.
Well, listen, thank y'all so much for hanging out with us. As always, we really do appreciate you. Of course, until next time, keep rising. But also, until next time, be the bridge. We'll holler at you later. Love you all.
It's just some things, there's no going back. You know what I'm saying?
jwoodbeats.com.
Yeah. I'm not the one with the issues. I hear you. Now here is your tissue. If I'm moving too fast, I might have to dismiss you. And it's really too bad, cause I really will miss you. But I'm not the one with the issues. I left him at church when I made it official. I murdered the curse with my own benediction. Left God in the dirt, call it death of the fiction. Superstition will be served an eviction. Competition will be left in the ditch. Oh my God, it's too damn hot in this kitchen. The fishes of men are now swimming with fishes. Oops, my bad, I guess I'm moving too vicious. Verses sold, I gotta put them on your wish list. Bless my soul, cause I'm dodging your little hit list. I guess you know, you just lost another witness.
Gotta let me go, gotta let me go, gotta let me go.